Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome back to another week of Cozy Horror with me, Dr. Plague. Let's get you 5 more great stories about strange places that seem to pop up out of nowhere. Let's start off right with a trip to one of the many government black sites and the people that work there. Let's take a trip to Black Site 7.
I'm in the wind now. I'm sure I'll be dead by tomorrow, but I need to let people know this thing is loose. I'm an agent with the United States government, and my station is Black Site number 7. I won't tell you my name. It wouldn't matter much anyway, but this was not how I saw my life going. I spent 6 years in Iraq, signed up right after high school. It was nothing like the recruiter told me it would be. I spent 8 hours in the blistering heat. I hauled my fair share of comrades out of firefights, and I saw a lot of crap out there that would make an ordinary person go crazier than I might be. I've had a camel spider crawl on me while I sleep. I watched friends I've known since basic get decapitated through binoculars, burned houses full of insurgents and civilians to rubble, and a lot of other things I really don't like to talk about. When I was done, they gave me my papers, thanked me for my service, and sent me home. I know I have no right to complain. Many guys didn't make it back. But home was worse. I'd spent 6 years in an active combat zone, and now I was just, supposed to come home and go back to civilian life? I spent 3 months in the civilian world. 2 of those months were spent in crappy apartments because my parents couldn't handle the night terrors and the jumpy Marine that their son had become. Every car horn, every barking dog, every firework rattling in the street had me reaching for my gun or breaking into a cold sweat when I couldn't find it. Before TJ found me, I was honestly considering killing myself. Then one day, he was just at my door with that big shit-eating grin he'd always worn in the desert. "You look like hell, Hoss. Let me get you some pancakes. I got something I want to discuss with you." TJ was my platoon leader in the sandbox. They called him the comedian because he was always smiling, always cracking jokes. He was a functional sociopath. I guess most of us were. I always admired his ability to laugh in the face of the messed up stuff we did. TJ is not his real name, clearly, but since he's still in this crap and I've left it behind, I figure the best I can do is not remind them that he's why I'm here. So he took me to breakfast. In the back of a crowded Denny's, he laid it all out for me. "You got it bad, Hoss, but that's okay, 'cause old Uncle TJ has the cure for you. Got a new job, familiar work that might interest you. Ever hear of Two Trees?" As it happened, I had. Two Trees was a government institute that, on the surface, did a lot of medical research and clinical trials. Underneath, though, they did wet work, and anyone who was involved in covert ops knew about Two Trees. We'd worked with them a few times in Iraq, and their guys were spooky, to say the least. "You're looking at the new head of Black Site number 7. I furrowed my brow at him. "Congrats. Should I know what that is?" "Of course not. It's a closely guarded government secret. Two Trees is paying me a small fortune to keep it that way. Problem is, I need someone to curate the site for me. Someone with military training, experience with firearms, and a need for some normalcy. Know anyone that might fit that bill, Hoss?" I knew what he was asking, but I didn't think I was the one he was looking for. I hadn't found work in 3 months since I'd been back, and most of that was because I couldn't settle into anything. I was constantly jumpy, constantly on edge, and that makes it hard to find work. No one wanted you doing security work or minding a gas station when every backfiring car was an enemy combatant. What would happen if I had an episode in a government facility of all places? I shook my head. "Thanks, but no thanks. I don't think I'm fit for duty the way I am." "Yeah, I thought you might say that." He pulled a metal tin out of his front pocket and slid it across the table. "Your medical file reads like a bench work for PTSD. Night terrors, irritability, being on edge, those irrational bouts of anger that got you thrown out of your parents' house." I felt defensive. "How did you know about that?" "You'd be surprised what my level of clearance will get you. The therapist records were about as hard to get as a beer at a gas station. Well, I got a little present for you, Hoss. Welcome to the rest of your life," he said, tapping the outside of the silver case. The case was about as big as an Altoids tin. There were no markings on it, no filigrees or needless ornaments, and it had the distinctly surgical look that you usually see with military tech. I slid my hand towards it, but I didn't seem to want to touch it. Every sense I had told me to walk away right now, not to touch that thing, and just walk away from this unassuming little case. I forced my hands to pop it open instead. Inside was a pair of gray gel caps. What are these? These are the answer to your prayers. 2 of these a day will make you feel as calm and clear as you did when you were a lad of 18. No more jumping at every noise. No more reaching for your gun when a dog barks or a car backfires. Just peace of mind. Looking back, that's probably what Mephistopheles said when he spoke to Faust. What's the catch? These pills are only available through the Two Trees Corporation. Employees who agree to be part of the clinical trials get them free of charge. But they're only available to employees, he said, with a little grin. Take them. Take a day to feel the effects, and let me know what you think. Call me tomorrow and give me your answer. Enjoy a night of freedom, then make your decision. I took the pills home with me, and after a few hours of staring at them, I took them with some vodka. The effects were sudden and immediate. If you've never had PTSD, then it's hard to explain, but it's like having a loose wire and someone suddenly fixes it. Then you go back to the way you used to be. My anxiety just melted away. My fear dissipated. My unease and dread were gone, and my anger seemed like a distant memory. I was sitting in my crappy apartment, surrounded by the trappings of my depression and my anxiety, and suddenly, I felt like I had before I boarded that bus in 2003 and headed out to basic training. I was finally comfortable in my own head. It was like coming back to a safe place after years of running from danger. After the first good night's sleep I'd had since shipping out, I called TJ and told him I was in. One question, I asked. What's in the pills that makes them work so well? He was silent for a long minute, and then finally he said, You really don't want to know, Hoss. Pack your stuff. There will be a moving truck to take you to West Virginia in the morning. And that is how I came to work at Black Site number 7. I must have looked like a junkie by the time I pulled up in front of my new house. I didn't have much. The truck had taken all 4 boxes into the deep woods as I followed in my old compact. The journey took me about 16 hours, and by the time I got there, I was starting to feel the anxiety creep back in. I became angry at how slow the truck was going, afraid that this whole thing was a trick and they would kill me. By the time I arrived, I found myself wanting to die, hoping for death, so I could return to the quiet that had been in my head before. That was when I saw TJ standing at the gate of what looked like an old military checkpoint. He flashed that knowing smile and handed me another silver case. I dry swallowed the pills without a word and felt the inner peace worming its way back into my brain. Then he showed me to my new quarters. It was a little bunk room with a bed, a kitchenette, and a locker for my clothes. There was a footlocker for my personal stuff, and I was told to keep the place clean. I would be responsible for the site and its security. TJ showed me a terminal off the bedroom for monitoring and camera feeds. The compound had cameras all over the place, but I appeared to be the only person here full-time. Site's mostly for storage these days, but it's what we get up to here at night that may interest you. That's why you're here. I need someone I can trust to watch this site 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. 4 times a year, you'll be relieved for a week of R&R somewhere. But other than that, this is your world, Hoss. That didn't bother me. I had no problem being alone after 3 months of people. What I was curious about was what I would be doing out here. What am I looking at exactly? TJ pointed at the 3 buildings on the camera. Truck comes twice a week. Let them through the gate and don't bother them. They'll take what they need from the building and won't bother you either. Keep nosy people out. Lethal force is authorized, and don't ever go in there, or I'll have to show you where Black Site 8 is, he said with a smile. The smile didn't make it to his eyes. Don't worry about being vigilant, though. If anything bigger than a mouse moves out there, the alarms will let you know about it right away. He told me that my food would be delivered once a week, mostly MREs, and I could order anything I wanted from the terminal in the living room. There was a workout yard near the second building, and I could move through the woods if I chose, as long as I took my phone with me so I could get alerts from the console. By the way, hand me your phone, he said. When I did, he put it in his pocket and handed me a new one. That's your new phone. I'll take the keys to your car, too, and put the money in your account. This is your life now, Hoss, so don't take this job lightly. If you leave the grounds, we'll know. If you try to update social media or try to tell anyone on the outside about what you've seen here, we'll know. If you want to get married or feel like you need out, arrangements can be made after your first 5-year tour. As far as anyone is concerned, you no longer exist. Don't be stupid. Put in your 5 years, and we'll reassess your position then. He grinned again and punched me in the arm. And lighten up. This'll be the easiest 5 years of your life. From that point on, I was an employee of Two Trees. TJ had been right. The first 5 years flew by. I lived on the site, spending my days working out or watching TV. I played the latest video games and watched the newest movies. Twice a week, as advertised, a truck rolled up and honked. I would check the cameras, open the gates, and they would do the rest. They would honk when they were ready to leave, and I left them alone. The trucks always had the Two Trees logo on them, and they never popped in to give me any crap, and I never went out to give them any. I never tried to get into the warehouses. I'd been a soldier long enough to know how to check my curiosity, and the scares were minimal. The food kept coming, the pills kept coming, and kept me in the right mind, too, and it was pretty peaceful, all told. The alarms, to my knowledge, only went off 3 times in that first year. 2 of those times it was a deer who had wandered too close. The first time it happened, I had slunk out in a panic, service pistol in hand and boxer shorts flapping. As I rounded the first warehouse, I drew down on a very surprised doe who darted away before I could draw a bead on her. It was kind of a special moment for me. I had never seen a deer up close, and as it ran away, I was glad I hadn't shot it. The third time the alarm went off, it was a person, though. It was the first person I'd seen in 3 months. I'd been sitting at the console one night watching the latest Marvel Avengers movie. I think it might have been Infinity Wars. When the alarm went off, I paused the movie, expecting to see a deer or a rabbit on the monitor. My eyes went wide, though, when I realized it was a person. He had a crowbar. He was attempting to pry the door open. He must have come out of the woods because if he had driven up, I would have known about it sooner. It had been 3 months since I'd seen another person. The last one had been Agent Daughtry, who'd come to relieve me for a week of R&R in September. The idea of seeing a person not connected with Two Trees made me feel weird. Even when you were on R&R, you went to a company resort or a company place full of company people. This stopped you from getting a little too drunk and talking about all the stuff you did for your country. It was a great idea, but it meant you had nearly no interaction with civilians. I took my pistol out and crept up on him in near silence. When my foot came down on an extra crunchy stick, he turned his head and noticed me. He raised the crowbar as if to attack, and the rest was instinct. The gun went off without me having even spoken to him, reflexes taking over and dropping the threat before it could become a real danger. His left eye popped like an overripe fruit, and he fell down on the hard December ground. I called TJ, and he and some of the other men in suits came to assess the damage. You did just right, Hoss. He was a threat to the facility and needed to be put down. Don't think for a minute that this reflects poorly on you. What will you do with him? I asked. TJ smiled. Immediate disposal, Hoss. Think you got the stomach to help us? I found that I did, and once he was doused in gasoline, we set him ablaze at the edge of the property. They gave me a week of R&R for that, and when I came back, TJ must have decided that I was worthy of being brought in on certain things. The alarm went off about a week after I'd come back from R&R, and I saw a black car rolling up the front gate. TJ stepped out of it and waved as it stopped in the concrete roundabout, other men getting out as well. I slid my shoulder holster on and went out to meet him. It was 11 p.m., and a visit this late was highly irregular. As I approached the vehicle, 2 guys in suits were bringing a man with a bag on his head out of the car. He was wearing scrubs, his hands bound behind his back, and I could hear him crying beneath the black hood he wore. I looked between them, waiting for an explanation, and TJ threw an arm around me and walked me towards the spot where we had burnt the trespasser. Hoss, I think it's time that we bring you in on the second reason for black sites. You see, sometimes Two Trees has assets that need to be eliminated. The black sites are often used for this purpose. It's always the responsibility of the site's caretaker to carry out the elimination. Fringe benefits, I suppose you could say. Why wasn't I told this before? I asked, feeling indignant. I'm no murderer. Oh, well, those combatants in Iraq will be glad to hear that, won't they? He said almost snidely. That was war, TJ. This is murder. Think of this as war too, Hoss. These people are enemies, and they need to be eliminated for the good of the public safety. It's part of the job, Hoss, a part I know firsthand that you're capable of. They put the man on his knees in the middle of the burn spot, and I could hear him praying under that hood as we stood around him. Put him down, Hoss. That's an order, TJ said. And if I won't, I said, looking at him icily. The 2 men on either side drew their guns, and TJ grinned. Then I'm afraid that these men will have to execute both of you. Come on, Hoss. Don't throw this away over some nobody. He's no different than the man outside the warehouse. Looking back, I kinda just wish I'd let them shoot me. But I guess if I had, you'd never know about any of this. Instead, I drew out my gun and put a bullet in his skull, glowering at TJ as his buddies put their guns away. You made the right choice, Hoss. Who knows? You might not have to do this more than a dozen times in the next 4 years. On that note, he was wrong. I executed an asset a month after that. They were mostly people in scrubs, people in lab coats, doctors, researchers, people who had likely tried to steal from whatever facility they worked at. They were men, women, old men, and scared 20-somethings. I never bothered to learn their names. They were just assets that needed to be eliminated. I became kind of numb to the process. We burned them afterwards. Gasoline and fire made it like they were never there. The spot near the edge had a charred look to it for a while after that. At the end of 5 years, TJ came to see me and asked if I wanted to re-up. What happens if I walk away? I asked. I was eating dinner when he came by, and he had sat down to have a plate of fettuccine with me. Given my free time, I had learned to do a good number of things that I couldn't before. I became a pretty good cook. I learned to play the guitar, read every book on the shelf I had bought to hold them, and there was a chainsaw out back along with some sculptures I had made with it. I couldn't say I hadn't enjoyed my time here, the killings aside, but I was curious to know if they'd actually let me leave. You'll be allowed to return to the real world, your bank account fuller and your retirement substantial. Just watch what you say out there. I'd hate to have to bring you back for your replacement to put a bullet in. I ended up signing up for another 4 years. I shouldn't have done that. I was 8 years deep when they brought the girl in the black bag to me. It was 2 a.m., and I had started to think about going to bed when the alarm went off. I saw the town car rolling up and looked for TJ. He was not the one that climbed out, however. This guy had his hair slicked back, his suit a perfect blue pinstripe. He didn't wave at me, and I felt a sense of dread as I grabbed my gun. Somehow I expected TJ to be under that bag this time. The man's name was Stein, and luckily he did not have TJ under that bag. What he did have was a kid with a thick black bag over their head. I couldn't tell at first if it was a boy or a girl. They were dressed in baggy clothes, Salvation Army rags that a homeless guy would be embarrassed to wear, and they were crying loudly under their hood. 2 familiar men had the kid, and they both looked stoic about the whole matter. Stein didn't say anything, just led the procession over to the charred spot and put the kid on their knees. When he didn't take the hood off, I did it myself. He winced, but he didn't stop me. This was my place, my job, and I had garnered a reputation for being a professional, a reputation I was about to ruin. The bag came off, and the little girl's tear-streaked face came into view in the harsh fluorescence. Her hair was cut short, dirty blonde, and her face was covered in bruises. Her nose looked broken, her lip split. The blood trickled down her face like red tears, and they mingled with her actual tears as they fell to the damp earth. I sighed, looking at Stein as the gun stayed at the ready. The hell is this? Stein looked surprised. It's an asset. TJ said you could handle these for us. Handle the asset. This is a kid, barely old enough to wipe her own ass. What could she have possibly done? Stein's face was stony. Yours is not to question, soldier. Liquidate this asset, or be liquidated. I looked at the kid, her whole face shaking as the tears and blood fell, and I thought about watching her head pop like a grape. This wasn't some scared adult, some stoic old man, some praying woman, or some cursing thing in a sallow skin. This was a kid. I had killed a lot of people, more in my time here than I ever had during war, but I was still a professional. Professionals had standards. No, I said. Stein blinked. What? No, I don't kill kids. Do it yourself. The 2 men drew their guns, and I was transported back in time. I was standing there, 2 days after Christmas, watching TJ grin and tell me the rules. Now I was standing in the woods, the autumn leaves carpeting the ground, feeling sure that it would soon drink both my blood and the girl's. I'll give you till the count of 3 to kill the girl. After that point, you will both be executed. 1. Their guns were unwavering, but so was my resolve. 2. I closed my eyes and prepared to die. 3. I heard a sound like wet concrete splitting open. It was followed by a high-pitched scream and a pair of bodies hitting the ground. I opened my eyes and saw Stein running towards the town car, his composure gone. The 2 men who'd been holding me at gunpoint were bleeding out on the ground from large, grisly neck wounds. As I watched Stein run, a rust-red something snapped out and caught him in the back of the neck, dropping him inches from the town car. The red thing protruded from the front of his neck, and he gasped futilely as he lay dying. I looked back in the direction of the thing that had snapped out and saw that the girl was now a mass of red spikes, segmented like spider legs. Her face had split down long ways, forcing her face into a grisly sideways maw. The area between the teeth glowed a deep red, and I could see the eyes on the girl's face blinking erratically. The two halves of her smile grinned at me, and the effect was a little dizzying. I figured for the second time that day that I was going to die, but she scuttled off into the woods instead, walking on her strange spidery appendages as she crashed through the trees. I stood there for a few minutes, not quite sure I believed I wasn't dead, and then I started running too. I crashed through the woods for hours, running in no particular direction, sure that at any minute the creature or a helicopter from Two Trees would fall on me and either rip me to pieces or just blow me away. I was blundering off with no wallet, no cell phone, just my gun and the clothes I'd been wearing. Was the phone how they tracked me? TJ hadn't said as much, but I kind of figured it was. When the ground went out from under me, I felt the air drop out of my lungs. I fell 5 feet off the muddy ledge and skinned my hands. My knees hurt where I had landed on them, and I realized pretty quick that I had fallen onto the road. If I thought it might be an illusion, the headlights that pinned me to the ground a moment later left me with little doubt. I was kind of numb to the idea of dying at this point, and I just lay there waiting to be run over. Thankfully, the truck stopped, and after a short conversation with the driver, he offered to take me into town. That's how I came to be here in this dingy hotel that just happens to have a computer in the lobby. I sold the gun for about $500 and figured I'd disappear as soon as I'm done writing this. They know I'm gone now, but I don't know if they think I'm dead or if they think I ran. Either way, they'll find me. I'm pretty sure of it. I'm more worried about the little girl that's loose in the woods, and whatever it is that's living beneath their skin. If you see a young girl with short, dirty blonde hair, do not approach her. I don't know if she killed those men to get away, or if she killed them because she wanted to, but she should be considered dangerous if you encounter her in the wild. And if a man from Two Trees offers you a job, do not become the new curator of Blacksite 7. The job is definitely not at all what it appears to be.
I'm sure it makes you want to put in an application, as much as I do. Moving on, we have a child attempting to go somewhere mundane and everyday. A trip to the bathroom, however, quickly turns into a journey to another world. So let's hear a story about a hall pass.
Have you ever had a dream, maybe a memory from your childhood, so vivid that it almost has to be real? I'm not sure if this actually happened or not, but I've dreamed about it for the last 2 weeks, and I'm terrified that it will never stop. Whenever I close my eyes, it begins again, and each time, it's more vivid than the last. This isn't normal for me. Most days I couldn't tell you what I had for breakfast this morning, much less every detail of the dreams I had last night. But I can tell you every single detail of this event as though it happened just a second ago. It's the most terrifying thing that I've ever seen in my 30 years of life. And if it doesn't stop soon, I don't know what I'll do. I was 8 years old when I knew what terror really was. Miss Winkler was teaching us math, her blackboard covered in numbers and mathematical symbols, when my hand came up, my chubby fingers tickling the sky in anticipation. She'd been trying to engage us for about 45 minutes, enticing slivers of answers out of kids who'd rather be playing outside or pretending to be Power Rangers. When my hand came up, she looked so hopeful. Maybe she thought she had finally reached a student, perhaps. Maybe she thought she'd finally had a breakthrough, and a student would begin to return her answers to her. When she called on me, I can still see the hopeful smile that stretched her painted lips as she said my name with great expectation. Unfortunately, I was about to break her heart. "Can I go to the bathroom, Miss Winkler?" I asked in my high, innocent voice. Her face fell, and as an adult, I can understand that disappointment. "Yes, take the hall pass when you go." The hall pass was a ruler with the word hall pass written on it in magic marker. It was smudged from many dirty hands, and as I took it up and left the room, my adult mind wondered how many other hands had touched it over the years. As a kid, all I had wondered about was whether or not I could use it as a convincing lightsaber. I suppose kids do have different priorities, don't they? I swished and buzzed it all the way to the bathroom, and as I came up to the squat little building, I felt nothing besides a need to pee. The brick building was large enough to hold 2 bathrooms, a boys' and a girls', and 4 students comfortably inside each. I remember it being cold and damp in the winter, but I thought it would be mercifully cool on this blistering summer day. As I pushed the door open, I felt cold air ruffle my hair. Today, though, something didn't feel quite right about this place. The darkness was oppressive, pervasive, and even as a child I could feel that something was different. I reached inside and groped for the light switch. My hand slid over the slimy walls but found nothing. I knew there should be a light switch here, but as I scrambled my hand over the moist tiles, I became more and more aware of how badly I needed to pee. I finally decided to just go use the stall in the dark, the dingy windows letting in enough light that I wouldn't be in complete darkness. The door swung shut behind me. I felt the air pull it closed very hard, and the sound echoed off the bathroom walls. The dingy windows showed me 2 urinals and 2 walled-off toilet stalls. I went into one of the stalls, always feeling more comfortable sitting down to use the bathroom, and got comfortable as my bladder began to empty itself. As I started to do my business, I became aware of the strange noise from the stall next to me. The stalls were made of concrete blocks, painted glossy white, but they were not entirely built into the floor. There was a small opening at the bottom, about a foot high, where you could see into the stall next door. As I sat in the greasy semi-light, I heard the sound like mud dripping onto the floor. Every 5 seconds, it would glop, glop, glop onto the floor. Underneath the sound was another, softer, wetter, heavy breathing that was so low it was almost inaudible. I had finished using the bathroom by this point, but the sound mesmerized me. I had never heard anything like it, and I was fascinated and terrified to see what made a sound like that. Slowly I bent down so I could look under the wall, too afraid to simply go open the stall and see what was in there. As my knees bent to the cold concrete and my hands splayed over the rough floor, I brought my eyes down to peek and saw something that I will never forget. If it was dingy dark in my stall, then it was nearly pitch black in the other. As my eyes adjusted, I could see something on the other side that looked like nothing so much as rippling mud or swaying pudding. It was a mass, a wiggling mass of something that nearly blocked out the entire opening. As I watched, it rippled and shook endlessly as the sound of wet, labored breathing only got louder. Before long, it was more than background noise. It covered the dripping gloop with its damp and difficult chorus. I couldn't look away. I couldn't drag myself away from it until something round and angry floated through the muck and seemed to see me seeing it. It was an eye. I was up in a heartbeat, legs drawn up to my chest as I sat on the toilet and clutched myself. I held the ruler to my chest like a makeshift weapon and tried to silence my growing terror as the breathing became growly and agitated. The door burst open on the other stall, and I thanked my lucky stars that I had remembered to lock the door to my own cubicle before starting my business. Whatever was on the other side banged against the door. It sounded like waves crashing against a levee, and all I could do was cower and try not to scream, worried it might excite the creature and push it to further violence. It slammed in again and again, and as it did, I almost thought I could feel flecks of whatever it was made of slapping off and splatting on the ceiling and floor. It battered the door mercilessly, and to my horror, I could see the simple slide lock joggling and shuddering under every blow. The sound it made was like a mudslide, like mud pushing its way through a hallway during a flood, and I just knew that any minute it would break the door and cover me. Then it stopped. Whatever it was gave one final slap against the door, and then rumbled off out of the bathroom. I sat petrified, unable to move for nearly 5 minutes, before I finally found myself able to control my shaking legs. It was gone. Whatever it was gone, but I wanted it to be gone and well gone before I decided to come out. The lock didn't want to open, but it popped open after a few hard slaps with my hand. The door creaked outward on warped hinges, and I could tell that the cubicle door was definitely going to need replacing. As I turned to look at it, I could see several dark stains on the outside where something had slammed its soupy body into it again and again. Something dripped onto my shoulder, and my scream peeled off the walls like a startled bird. I scuttled back on crab legs. My knees had buckled, and I watched as something thick and muddy dripped off the ceiling and fell onto the cracked tile. I looked up to see a dozen or more little stalagmites, or maybe they were stalactites, hanging from the ceiling. They oozed and threatened to fall, their creation having taken place very recently. At that moment, all I wanted to do was get out, to escape, but I should have known that it wouldn't be that easy. When I pushed the door open, it didn't swing out onto the yellowing grass of my school sports field, but onto a shadowy hellscape of swirling lights and acrid smells. My child's mind didn't understand everything, didn't even understand some of the things, but it did understand that there were many moving mountains out there that made the one in the bathroom look like an anthill. The smaller ones congregated around towering fires, the dusty brown earth scraped shiny by their passing, and around them seemed to grind mountains that towered up into the greasy sky. Their tops were illuminated by infrequent forks of lightning. I could see towering rock sentinels made of ever-flowing viscous earth. It was too much. I closed the door and crumpled into a corner between the dripping sink and the wall. I made myself as small as possible. I felt as a bug must feel when it's surrounded by humans, and as my mind tried to process what I had seen, I seemed on the verge of breaking. How could I process something so big without going insane? The smallest of them had been barely able to be contained by this building. The largest of them could have destroyed this building without thinking. My mind could not fathom the sheer size of them, the knowledge of these moving mountains, so I did the only thing I could to keep myself from going insane. I put myself to sleep. The janitor found me there, and when he touched my shoulder, he said I fought and screamed like a cornered animal. He didn't mind, though. He was glad he had found me. It was night when he took me out of the little toilet building, and he had to be very firm with me to get me to go outside into the gloom. I was afraid it was a trick. The dark reminded me of the greasy blackness of that place, and it wasn't until my mother saw us coming out and ran to me that I knew I was back where I belonged. They took me to the principal's office. My dad, my teacher, the principal, the police officers, they were all waiting there for me. My dad hugged me, folding me into his warm embrace, and my teachers and principals asked me where I had been. When the janitor said he had found me in the toilet, my teacher seemed confused, and the police seemed aggravated. "You said you searched the entire school," said the principal, not just to my teacher, but also to the police officers. "We did. We even brought the dogs in. There's no way that kid's been in the bathroom for 2 days. My face must have shown how confused I was as I tried my best to follow the explanation. They told me I'd been missing for 2 days. The school had been searched, a code Adam had been ongoing, and they had searched every place I liked and every friend's house I'd ever been to. I tried to tell them about the monsters, about the weird world full of giant things, but they just shook their heads and said I must have been hiding this whole time. I think my parents were just happy that I was safe, and the principal didn't punish me, even though I sensed that he really wanted to. I think my teacher believed me when I told her I wasn't hiding, holding the hall pass out to her in a shaky hand. She knew I was a good kid, and didn't usually cause more than the average 8-year-old's amount of trouble. She quit the next year, and I was removed from her class at my parents' request. When she saw me in the halls after that, I could swear that she looked almost sad to see me. I haven't thought about that place in years. After it happened, my parents took me to see a psychiatrist, and she helped me put it out of my mind. I would only remember it sometimes in the dark hours of the night, but it was gone just as quickly, even though it comes back in vivid detail, and I don't know how much longer I can handle it. I see the mountains moving as I stand in the doorway of that bathroom. I know that they will end me if they see me. I know that if they see a way to our world, they will end all of us, and I'm afraid of what I'll see the next time I open that door.
Makes you wonder where that door might open to next time. Let's play a little game of hide and seek in this next story, as we travel to an odd place, an odd house, that you can actually visit if you happen to be in my neck of the woods. Let's take a trip and play a little hide and seek at the Martin house.
They call it the Martin House, and it's easily the most haunted place in town. During the day, it's a beautiful 2-story estate in the Millville area. It sits behind a high gate overlooking the bay on 10 acres, which comes at a premium given the land's cost inside of Panama City. The current owner keeps up the grounds, maintains the home, but they say he will not live in the house or be there after night. He rents it out for parties and events, lets people picnic on the grounds, opens it during the day for tours and historic outings. But an hour before sunset, the gates are locked and the place is cleared of people. It's a beautiful place, but they say that the devil walks there after dark. The local legend says that Mr. Martin suspected his wife was having an illicit affair with a servant. They say that in a fit of jealousy, he made her watch as he hung him, later hanging his wife and kids and himself from the same large tree in the front yard. They say you can hear voices, screams, and all kinds of odd noises there after dark. They say people have seen figures in the windows and on the grounds near sunset, with black eyes and pale faces. They say you can see lights come on and off in the house after dark, and it's best avoided once the sun goes down. They say a lot of things, but as a writer of dark fiction, I don't put a lot of stock in local legends. I don't believe in Billy Bowlegs. I don't believe in Kissing Mary. And I don't believe in the hitchhikers they say you can pick up by the West Bay Bridge. The Martin House, however, is something I do believe in, because when I was young, I experienced it firsthand. It was 1993 or 94 when it happened, and I was about 7 or 8. My mother had worked at the same hospital for years, and that hospital had chosen to do their employee appreciation picnic on the grounds of the Martin House. I have to believe they were aware of the dark history of the place, but like I said, nothing ever happened during the day, so they weren't worried. The yard was huge, and the Human Resource Department set up games and tents and all kinds of other things to entertain the kids while their parents socialized. I fell in with a couple of kids that I knew, and we played some games and explored the booths, but ultimately got a little bored with the scheduled events. These were kids that I didn't know well, but we all knew each other in that way that you know someone after spending years upon years going to these sorts of scheduled events with them. One of them was the son of my mom's friend. Another one was a kid I actually went to school with, but didn't really pal around with outside of things like this. Another one was just a kid who would wander up and fall back in with us when we all got together. There were about 7 of us that day, the rest of them just falling in with a group of kids to play games, and I can't remember who suggested that we play hide and seek. It was unanimously agreed upon, but after playing on the lawn for a few rounds, it became a little dull. When someone suggested that we could play in the house, that sounded like a much better idea. So we went inside, but quickly discovered the problem with playing indoors. The house was kind of a museum, and adults didn't really like it when kids were running around things that could be broken. We tried for a couple of rounds, but after being yelled at by a lady in a dress, we thought we might have to go back outside. That was when we saw the kid on the stairs. Like I said, none of us really knew each other, but none of us had ever seen this kid. He was youngish, probably 5 or 6, and he didn't really say anything. He just sort of stared at us through the slats on the staircase, and I'll remember the way he looked at us for my entire life. He seemed both fascinated by our appearance and utterly terrified at our game. He looked at us the way I looked at the dog sometimes, when he was making noise while my dad was trying to nap. He looked like he thought we might wake up a parent that would be angry. Someone suggested that maybe we could go play upstairs, and we all thought that might be a good idea. The upstairs was usually blocked off, but If that kid was up there, then the door must be unlocked. None of us had ever gone upstairs. It was locked, like I said, but we found the door was open, so we all went up. The upstairs was about the same size as the downstairs, but we saw a ladder going up into the attic and thought that would make the best place for hide and seek. It would be dark up there, probably with stuff to hide behind, and it would be spooky. What we found was a pretty big attic with boxes and furniture covered in sheets. It was dusty and cobwebby and reminded me of the opening of one of my favorite shows, Are You Afraid of the Dark? We decided who was going to be it, then we all went to hide. It was dusty in the attic, and a few of us got found right away when we started sneezing. I expected that we might see the kid we had seen earlier, but there was never any sign of him. I didn't think much about it. Kids rarely question things that don't come from adults. And as we played, the volume of our game became louder and louder. We began to scream with joy every time someone was found, and some of them had taken to scaring each other instead of just playing hide and seek. I'm sure that some of the people from downstairs could hear us, but given that we were 2 floors up, we might have been mistaken for just regular noise. I was hiding behind a vanity near the back of the attic, peeking out from around the edge of the sheet, when I heard a little voice in my ear that scared the crap out of me. It scared me because up until then, I'd been the only person hiding behind the vanity. You guys shouldn't be here. You're gonna wake up Daddy, and he'll be mad." I turned around, and there he was. He was crouched down behind the vanity, looking at me with these big, sad, scared eyes. And now that I was closer, I could see he was dressed in suspenders and a grubby-looking white shirt. His feet were bare, and his hair looked like someone had cut it with a bowl. I asked him who he was, but he shook his head and put a finger to his lips as he made a shushing sound. "Shh. You're gonna wake up Daddy, and he's gonna be mad." I started to ask him who he was talking about, when all of a sudden we heard loud footsteps coming up the stairs. Someone was yelling, but it wasn't regular yelling. Usually when my dad yelled, there were swear words in it or some kind of direction. This yelling was just babbling, like an angry beehive or a car when it needs an oil change. It was angry, and it was loud, but there really wasn't any substance to it. The game quieted down as we all became the hiders. We knew that we shouldn't be here. We all knew that if we were found, we'd be in trouble. So we all took to hiding as someone came very angrily up the ladder. I could see the others as they hunkered around the other covered piece of furniture and storage boxes. They all looked scared, but they also looked excited. This was a different level to the game, something a little scarier. We all knew that this was the real game, and we had to win, or we might never be allowed to come back again. Through the white, oiling up out of the square hole, came a large something. It was man-shaped, but maybe not a person. It had arms and legs. I could see a head, but the rest of it seemed to just be shadows. It was like someone standing in total darkness, and I think even then I suspected that this was no museum curator coming after noisy children. The hairs on the back of my neck began to stand up, and as the thing started looking for us, I turned and found the little boy was gone. The other kids seemed to have felt it too, and as the thing moved towards the left side of the attic, we all started shuffling to the right. It knocked over a box and kept yelling in that strange, barely coherent way. It didn't seem unfamiliar with the attic, and I wondered if it was up here looking for us, or if it was looking for the little boy who'd been a stranger to me. Either way, we made our way back to the ladder and started quietly going down onto the second floor. We were almost all down, when the thing turned and looked at the 2 or 3 of us that were left. He didn't have eyes, at least none that I could see, but I felt very seen by it, and the last of us went down in a herky-jerky pile of bodies. We ran back to the staircase, and that's when someone else found us. We burst through the door that led out onto the stairwell, and almost knocked over a lady with a tour guide name badge. She blinked at us and did not seem at all happy to see 7 or 8 kids coming out of a restricted area. She asked what we thought we were doing in there, and we told her that we thought it was open. She said no, the door was always locked, and told us we better get out of there before we got in trouble. When she asked how many of us there were, that's when we seemed to disagree. Some of us said 7, but a few of us insisted that there were 8. No, there was only 7 of us. Remember, that's why we didn't play Capture the Flag. Yeah, but then the other kid joined us, so we had 8. What other kid? There was only ever 7 of us. The kid in the suspenders. He was playing in the attic with us. At that point, the lady was completely frazzled and collected up all of us and brought us downstairs to have a talk with our parents. In the meantime, she had a few of the other people search the 2nd floor and the attic for a missing kid. Most of our parents were not terribly pleased about being drug away from the festivities because their kids couldn't behave, and we got an earful as we stood in the foyer of the Martin house. Some of us, me included, were more worried about the missing kid than getting into trouble. I can't speak for everyone, but I'd seen how scared he was. I don't know who he was afraid of, but I was afraid that whatever that thing had been, it had got him. As my dad let me have it for acting out, my eyes started to wander. I was looking at the pictures on the wall, the ones showing the Martin house through the years, before they finally settled on a very familiar face. The kid looked less scared and more confused, but it was definitely him, standing on the front lawn with 2 other kids and his parents. The house behind him looked a little different, but it was definitely the one we were standing in right now. Hey, that's him, I said, interrupting my dad in the middle of his lecture. Who's him? My dad asked, not appreciating being interrupted. That's the kid, the one I saw in the attic. The lady who had found us looked at the picture before shaking her head and telling me not to tell lies. No, really, I assured her. That's him. He was hiding with us. He told me that we were going to wake his daddy up. He looked really scared. My parents didn't believe me, but I've seen that picture since, and I know now that that little boy is one of the Martin brood. He was one of the kids who allegedly hung from the tree in the front yard, and I would have bet you anything that was his spirit we saw. The big shadowy thing didn't look at all like Mr. Martin, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. The kid didn't have black eyes like all the other stories tell, but maybe that's something that comes a little later. I've encountered a lot of strange things in my life, but that was one of my earliest scrapes with the paranormal. As of writing this, the Martin house still sits in the same spot. They've completely closed off the inside these days, and after that year, the hospital started doing their employee appreciation somewhere else. I don't know if it was the house itself or because they got a better deal somewhere else, but I never went back to the Martin house again.
I wouldn't believe it myself if I hadn't seen it. Moving on, we go on a trip to the middle of the woods where we find a strange body of water and a rickety bridge that might just bring us a little closer to it. So let's take a trip into the blue.
I opened the mailbox and started shifting the mail around to see what today's bunch of crap was. Bill, credit card offer. My hand froze as I looked at the envelope, my jaw quivering a little as I read the address on the front and the name of the sender. This hadn't happened in years, not since I'd left college, but I'd felt safe enough to settle somewhere, hoping that the letters had stopped. It had been 3 years since she'd written, but it made me feel like I was a teenager again.
fearing that anyone but me would find those letters. From Catherine Mansley to Justin Mansley. Dear brother, it's been so long. You should come see me in the blue. Love, Catherine. I tore the letter up and went back inside, trying not to notice how the paper had made my fingers feel clammy and moist. The envelope, too, had been the same way, moist and difficult to hold. It was like wet paper that had dried badly, but it was always that way. When Catherine sent me letters, they were always like that. I had kept them at first, hiding them so no one would find them, but I burned them now, not wanting them anywhere near me. I picked up the phone to call Daniel, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried to call my uncle, but Uncle Mike was hoping I had seen Daniel. He said he'd been missing for a week now, and everyone was getting worried. I can hear him calling me now as I sit on the floor with my knees against my chest, trying not to hyperventilate. But I know it's useless. That feeling is the closest I can come to drowning, the closest I can come to understanding why Catherine writes these letters. Daniel, Carter, Clint, Henry, they're all gone now. I'm the last one that Catherine hasn't got. When we were kids, or early teens, we would all stay at Grandpa's cabin over the summer. Grandpa was long dead, Grandma too, but the cabin was always called such. My mom and dad would usually come up first to get it ready, and I loved the time before my cousins got there, the times I could just enjoy the cabin. I haven't been back in years, not since we went back for Clint, but I can still remember the cabin. It was more of a lodge than a cabin, and Dad claimed that Grandpa's dad, our great-grandpa, had built it by hand. It was made from the huge old trees in the area, and it had a big area downstairs with 4 rooms above it. The rooms were easily as big as hotel rooms, the Motel 6 kind, and they held our family and the families of my cousins easily. Dad had a brother, Uncle Mike, and a sister, Aunt Claire, and both of them had 2 kids. Catherine was the only girl in the family, other than Aunt Claire, and the youngest. That meant she tried extra hard to keep up with her older cousins, and it often led her to trouble. The time she fell out of a tree and broke her arm, the time she'd bruised her legs and butt jumping her bike over a 15-foot drop, the time she'd nearly drowned at Carfer's Pond, were all times she was trying to keep up with us. We were merciless, too, giving her no quarter, and it must have been miserable for her. We loved to hike and swim and spend time in the cabin, but the thing we all looked forward to seeing the most when we came out here was the blue. The blue was a hole in the woods, more like a pit than anything, with water inside that was perfectly blue, like the stuff inside the jar where the barber keeps his combs. It went 30 feet into the earth, the precipice sheer and easy to stumble into if you weren't paying attention. The water inside was so blue that it hurt your eyes if you looked at it for too long, and it always looked artificial to me. Someone had hung a bridge over it, a rickety thing that swung across on ropes, and my cousins and I thought it was great fun to go and tempt fate by bouncing on it and making it sway. Thinking about that now makes me downright shudder, but all kids think they're immortal. I was 12 when it happened, but it could have happened before then easily. We'd been at the cabin a week, swimming and fishing and generally enjoying our time in the woods, when Clint said he wanted to go see the blue today. He said it quietly because if he had said it any louder, his mom or my mom would have heard, and that would have been the end of it. All the adults knew about the blue and had forbidden us to go anywhere near it. Dad had told us stories about playing on that bridge when he and Uncle Mike were kids,
but Aunt Claire had always been too scared to go on that rickety old thing. I think my dad knew that we were going to go out to the Blue, probably expected it, and never expressly forbid us to go there, unlike my mom. He knew that forbidding it would just make it more enticing, and if he let us get it out of our systems, the Blue would become boring all on its own. I don't think he believed something tragic would happen, but if he had, he might have kept a closer eye on us. We told our mothers we were going on a hike, Uncle Mike, Uncle Dale, and Dad having gone fishing that morning, and they said that was fine, but to be back by lunchtime. We made our way out as quietly as possible, thinking ourselves clever for not letting Catherine hear us. But no sooner had we jumped off the back porch than here she came with a "wait for me." Clint grumbled that we should just run off without her, but that was when my mom poked her head out and told us not to forget Cat. Catherine seemed pretty pleased with herself as she followed us out of the yard, and as we hiked towards the Blue, she realized where we were going. "We can't go there," she said, looking scandalous. "Mommy said it was off limits." "Well, Mommy isn't here," said Daniel, "so if you don't want to come, then turn around and go back." Catherine seemed to think about it, but must have decided it was too far to walk back on her own. We were about 2 miles into the woods, and despite her desire to follow us everywhere, Catherine was kind of a scaredy cat. She didn't like being by herself, and it usually led to her getting hurt when she tried to follow us into dangerous situations. She still followed us, but suddenly she was a safe distance away as we made our way towards the Blue. When the trees parted and the edges of the pit opened up, we knew we had arrived. "There it is," Clint breathed, the lip coming into view not long after. "So cool." We had seen it a dozen times, but it was always awe-inspiring. The hole was like something punched by a meteor, the edges jagged and uneven. Maybe there was a meteor at the bottom. Maybe it was what made the water so blue, but we had never seen it. Well, not yet. We were only really interested in the bridge that day and cared nothing for the natural beauty. We spent the first few minutes just leaning over the edge and spitting into the water below. We couldn't see when it hit, but we knew it had. If the side had crumbled, we'd have all gone in. Then this story might have been very different. "Let's go on the bridge," one of them said. I think it was Clint, but could have been any of them. It was definitely Carter who agreed, but we all wanted to go. The bridge was what we lived for, the thrill we came back for, and the second my hands touched the ropes of that swinging death trap, I felt the adrenaline begin to pump within me. The bridge was in disrepair from the first time we found it, and it had only gotten worse over the years. It was missing a few boards, the ropes frayed and peeling, and we should have known it was only a matter of time before there was a problem. When we got to the bridge, all of us crowding onto it as we usually did, Henry moved to the front and began swinging it from side to side. The ropes creaked as we all laughed and held on. Henry was quite a bit larger than most of us, and when he rocked the bridge, he really rocked the bridge. It swayed wide over the gap, and we all laughed and joked as we swayed along with it. We'd been cheating death for a couple of minutes when we realized that someone was missing. We looked back towards the lip of the pit and saw Catherine hunkered in the woods. She was miserable, not liking the sight of us trying to throw ourselves into the blue, and didn't seem to want any part of it. We joked and picked at her, but I wish now that I had seen the fear in her eyes and thought better of what we were doing. I should have been a better big brother on that day. "Come on, Cat," Clint said. "No way," Catherine said, grabbing one of the trees like we might try to pull her onto the bridge. "Don't be a scaredy cat," Clint sing-songed, repeating the phrase scaredy cat, again and again as the rest of us picked it up. I didn't pick it up till the last, but I chanted it right along with the rest of them. Catherine was clearly on the verge of tears, but she still had her pride. She stomped over to the bridge, as indignant as anyone could be at 6, but As she came to the edge, she started to look unsure again. Her hands shook as she reached for the ropes, and when Henry stepped out of the way, she walked hesitantly onto the rickety boards of the bridge. Henry closed off her retreat, and she stepped closer to our group as she tried her best not to cry. "All right, Henry, let's get some big swings in this time," Clint trumpeted. Henry seemed all too willing to oblige, and soon the bridge was rocking farther than I'd ever seen it rock before. It was swinging over the blue like a pendulum, and even I was afraid that we might go in. It was pivoting back and forth, the ropes groaning like a ship's mast in a high wind, and I wondered for a moment what it would be like to fall into that blue water. You could only really tread water for so long before you went under, and I wondered how long that would be. Would anyone get back with help before you drowned? I didn't see when Catherine fell off the bridge, but when Henry yelled out a moment later, I looked over and saw her when she hit the blue. She didn't splash, the water just stayed put, and she came up thrashing as she tried to get her head above the crystal blue water. The water must have been thick because she was really struggling to make headway in it. She was calling for help with big, gasping breaths. The bridge had stopped moving, all 5 of us looking down into the chasm and knowing that we were in trouble. We'd been playing where we shouldn't. We had been being stupid, and now someone had gotten hurt. "We've got to go get help," Daniel yelled, and his words were like a starter pistol. I ran for the cabin to try to get help, Daniel and Carter coming with me. I prayed Catherine could tread water while we ran the 20 or so minutes back to the cabin, but I knew that Catherine wasn't a strong swimmer. I didn't expect she would still be treading water by the time we got back, but I prayed to God that she would be. Mom, Aunt Claire, and Aunt Liz were at the table when we ran in, drinking tea and laughing, but they jumped up when we told them what had happened. Mom came running when she heard, grabbing a rope and running along behind us as we went back. My dad and uncle still weren't back from fishing, but Aunt Liz said that she would call emergency services to hopefully get someone down there. The run back took a little longer, all of us winded from the sprint to the cabin, but Catherine had only been in the water for 45 minutes by the time we got back. That wasn't so long, I thought. She could be fine. It turned out it was 45 minutes too long, though. Clint said that she'd gone under about 5 minutes after we'd left, and she hadn't come back up. My mom tied the rope off to a tree, but it was too short to make it down into the blue. She went back for another rope, my aunt staying with us, and by the time she got back, she had emergency services in tow. They brought long ropes and divers, and soon they were in the blue, trying to find her. The diver who went in said the blue was miles deep, and the water was like trying to swim in jello. They went as deep as they dared, but they never found Catherine. My dad and uncles came back from fishing to find my mother inconsolable, and Catherine presumed dead. They didn't have the heart to punish us for what had happened, and all of us said it had been a terrible accident. We left out the part where we'd been rocking the bridge, and they decided that Catherine must have lost her balance and fallen in. They shouted a little that they had told us to stay away from the blue, but they could see how shaken up we were by what had happened. They thought we had been punished enough, but it appeared that something else disagreed. We never went back to Grandpa's cabin again. It held bad memories for the 3 of us, and I don't think any of Dad's siblings went back either. None of my cousins went there willingly again. It held terrible memories for all of us, it seemed, and I think they knew something dark was waiting for us to come back. The first letter showed up 2 weeks after Catherine's funeral. The 2 weeks after we buried my sister were a really bad time for me. I was sad about what had happened to Catherine, but I was also unbelievably riddled with guilt over it. I felt that I had every right to be guilty. I'd played a part in what had happened, but I didn't think I'd been the biggest part. Looking back, my cousins were really the ones that had pushed her to get on the bridge, but I hadn't stood up and tried to protect her either. I'd failed in my duties as a big brother, and she had paid the price. My parents had been talking about back-to-school shopping, something they seemed unwilling to do, and my mother was trying to guilt my father into getting it done. They were both distraught over the loss of Catherine, but my mother had always been a bit of a realist when it came to things. My sister was dead, but I would still have to go to school whether I wanted to or not, and I would need things to begin school with. While they were arguing about it, Mom told me to go get the mail, see if the circular had come in. I think she wanted coupons out of it, but I can't really remember. I would find it hard to remember much about that day when I looked back, except for the letter. I went to the mailbox and found that there was a circular in there. There were also 2 bills, a couple of condolence cards, and a letter in a strange envelope. The envelope felt moist, the paper seeming damp and moldy, and I didn't like to touch it. I started to sandwich it between the condolence cards, and that's when I noticed it had my name on it. From Catherine to Justin Mansley. I felt the other pieces of mail slip from my fingers when I read the name. It couldn't be. Catherine was dead, dragged into the blue by whatever lay below, and there was no way that this letter could be from her. I thought it might be a trick, maybe one of my cousins, but they had all seemed as guilty about what happened to Catherine as I was. Clint hid it behind a constant stream of humor, but he still clearly felt like he needed to hide what he'd done. Like me, he realized that he could get in trouble if they knew that he'd been goofing around, and I didn't think he'd be stupid enough to try to pull something like this. I opened the strange envelope. I didn't want to. I wanted to throw it away, but I had to know what was inside. Even at 12, I knew there was no way it could be from Catherine. Dead people didn't send letters to the living, but I still had to know what was going on. The letter was brief. All of Catherine's letters have been brief. It's your fault. You should be the one in the blue. I just stood there for a moment, looking at the letter. I started to rip it up, thinking again that this was a cruel joke, but something stopped me. It isn't something I can really explain, but tearing that paper felt like tearing pages out of the Bible. It felt fundamentally wrong, and I ended up stuffing it in my pocket instead, as I collected up the mail that I had dropped on the pavement. I couldn't destroy it, but I didn't want my parents to find it either. What would they say if they saw it? Would they know what I'd done? I couldn't risk that. I was in enough turmoil over my sister's death without my parents blaming me for it. I came in and dropped off the mail, sneaking up to my room as I hid the letter in a box of baseball cards under my bed. It wouldn't be the only one soon enough. Over the next 2 months, I got 2 more letters, each on the same day of the month. After the second one, coming about 2 weeks after school started, I started checking the mail every day to make sure the letters didn't get picked up by my parents. I hid them in the same box, each of them reading similar to the one before it. I'm lonely. I miss you. It's your fault. Come to the blue. Come to the blue. Come to the blue. It was October, the leaves already a vibrant orange in the front yard, when Clint called me after I received my 3rd letter. "Are you doing this?" he asked, sounding angry and scared. Sounded like he was shaking something in the background, paper or something, and I asked what he was talking about. "These letters. Carter and I have each gotten 3. If this is you, then you need to stop. We all feel bad about what happened to Catherine, me especially, but this is going to get us in trouble. If one of our parents found those letters, then we could be in serious trouble for what we did. Your sister is gone, man. I'm sorry for it, but this isn't going to bring her back." I knew what he was talking about without having to be told. I told him I'd been receiving them too, and I bet Henry and Daniel had been getting them as well. I still didn't think they were from Catherine. There was no way for dead people to write you letters, but somebody clearly knew what we had done in the woods. Clint said that was impossible. We had been the only ones in the woods that day. or at least the only ones around the blue when Catherine had fallen in. He said it had to be one of us, and before he hung up, he was going to call Daniel to see if he was the one playing bad jokes. He called me back 20 minutes later and said they were just as freaked out as he was. He says he's been dreaming about the blue, and he knows that Henry has too. Henry's talking about the blue a lot these days, and Daniel is scared he's going to tell somebody what really happened. I hadn't thought of that either, but I suppose by then I thought it might be what we deserved. The letters kept coming on the same day of every month, and I realized that it was the same day that Catherine had gone into the blue. We all received our letters on the anniversary of her fall, and as Christmas came around, we all started to worry about Henry. Henry had always been a big boy, looking like a high schooler, even though he was only a year younger than Daniel. But when he came to our house for Christmas, he looked like he'd lost 30 pounds. It also looked like he might be pulling out his hair. He was twitchy, quiet, nothing like the boisterous boy we had seen a few months ago. Daniel told us that when he talked, it was about the blue. He said he dreamed about it, drew pictures of it, and in the pictures, Catherine was floating in it. Henry and Clint had been the last ones to see her alive in all that blue, but in the pictures, she was waving at them from the water. He says in his dreams, she comes out of the blue and tries to get him to jump in. She told him that it's nice down there, it's cool and wonderful, that he would really enjoy it if he were to come join her. He keeps talking about joining her, but I don't know how he would. Dad told Mom that we were never going back to that cabin, not after what happened. They're all really afraid that one of us will fall off that bridge if we went back, Daniel told us as we sat around the kids' table in the den. Henry sat at the table with us, but he did little more than move his fork around in his mashed potatoes, not really eating anything. A couple of months later, my aunt and uncle put Henry in a psychiatric facility. Dad told us he was sick, but Daniel said he'd started having night terrors, and he almost completely stopped eating. He couldn't go to school. He wouldn't play. It was like he just shut down completely. Daniel was afraid to sleep in the same room with him, and he really hoped that whatever this place was they had taken Henry to, that they could fix him. A month after that, Henry broke out of that facility and was never seen again. No one was quite sure how he had gotten out without being seen, but Henry was gone. Everything in the room was exactly the way it had been the night before, including the restraints that were still buckled in the same way they had been when the orderly put him to bed. The police thought for sure that they would find him walking along the road or something, maybe in the woods around the place, but they never did. Uncle Mike and Aunt Liz were devastated, but the four of us were pretty sure we knew where Henry was. They'd never find him, just like they never found Catherine. We were all pretty sure he was in the blue. The facility they put him in was about 30 miles from Grandpa's cabin, but we were still certain that that's where he was. When I got my letter that month, all my questions were answered. Henry came to join me in the blue. You should come and see him. He's much better now. Daniel and Clint called me later that day, and I told them I'd gotten the same news. What are we going to do? Clint asked. I didn't have an answer. Carter went next, though it took him 2 years to do it. Carter was about 2 years younger than Clint, the youngest of the cousins besides Catherine, and he held out only because he and Clint were so close. I don't think Clint's parents ever had any inkling of what was going on with their son, but by Thanksgiving, he was looking the same way Henry had. He was barely eating, and only then because Clint coaxed him. Clint had changed a lot since that summer when we lost Catherine. He had softened a little, and I think he had realized that life was a little more fleeting than he had believed. He said Carter wasn't sleeping, was having nightmares about the blue, and told Clint that Henry was in the dreams too now. Carter was smarter than the rest of us, not that that was saying much, but I think it helped him put off the bad feelings and get through it for a while. Unlike Henry, Carter just looked tired all the time, and when he came to my 14th birthday party that year, the bags under his eyes looked like bruises. "It's not as bad as it looks," he told me with a faint smile. "My parents sent me to a doctor to get some meds that help. Well, not really help, but they let me sleep. They make it harder to get out of the dreams, though." I asked him about the dreams, and despite Clint telling me not to make him think about them, Carter said he didn't mind. Daniel and I sat close, like students listening to a lecture, and Carter reeled a bit as he thought about them, not seeming sure how to begin. "I'm standing on the bridge. It's nighttime. It's always nighttime in the dreams, and I'm looking down into the blue. It's..." He blinked really fast for a few seconds and shook his head before going on. "It's glowing in the dreams. It's always glowing. As I stand and look down, Catherine and Henry come up out of the water and wave at me. They tell me to jump. They tell me to join them. They tell me how great it is down there. As they tell me, I kinda wanna jump. His eyes shut for a count of 5 before he jerks awake with a start. I want to go to them. There's no dreams in the blue, no nightmares or letters or anything. It's just peaceful." He leaned over onto Clint and started snoring, and Clint accepted his weight gratefully. Carter nearly made it to my 15th birthday party, and a lot of that was due to Clint. This whole thing brought us all closer together, and we called each other often. Daniel actually came to live with us for a while, his parents having trouble coping with Henry's disappearance. Aunt Liz was eventually put into the same facility that Henry had escaped from after she tried to overdose on sleeping pills, and Uncle Mike soon moved in with us too. He and Daniel looked sad most of the time, but I think they enjoyed having us close. Daniel had started having the dreams a lot more often, but he was 15 and starting high school, and he had other things to occupy his mind. If there was anyone who could have used our help, it was Clint. Clint had started high school too. He and Daniel were a year older than me, but he missed a lot of days while he tried to take care of Carter. Carter was losing his mind at an alarming rate, and Clint confided that he had started strapping him into bed at night. I caught him sleepwalking to the front door, and he fights me when I try to get him back to bed. I don't know how my mom and dad haven't noticed yet, but I may have to tell them soon. He's like a zombie, and I don't know how he makes it through school every day. A week before my 15th birthday, Aunt Claire called to tell us that Carter and Clint had gone missing. "They both disappeared in the middle of the night," she said tearfully. "I just don't know what to do. The police have no idea, but I'm hoping that maybe they'd gone to your house for some reason and they were safe." My mom said they hadn't, but she and Dad said they would help her look for them. "Clint's bike is gone too. I told Dale that Indian Scout was a bad idea, but he swore Clint was responsible and that he wouldn't just up and leave without telling us." Daniel and I were eavesdropping, and he said we both knew where he'd gone. After my parents left to join the search party, we piled into Daniel's Jeep and went to Grandpa's cabin, as little as we wanted to. Uncle Mike had left him the Jeep when he got his driver's license, but this would be the longest trip we had ever made in it. Grandpa's cabin was about 2 hours from my house, and despite having left a note, I was sure my mother would be worried sick. The drive seemed to take forever, and when we pulled up in front of the cabin, we found Clint's motorcycle out front, and we knew what we would find. It was dark when we got to the blue, and Clint was kneeling on the ground as if praying. The dirt beneath his forehead had turned to mud, and he didn't even look up when we approached. "I didn't catch him in time," he said through tears. "I didn't wake up until the sun was nearly up. By then it was too late. He beat me here by minutes. I don't know how. I tried to catch him, but he was already standing on the edge when I got here. I begged him to come back, but he just pitched over and went into the blue. He was right," he said, pointing. "It glows at night." I hadn't even noticed, but as I looked up, I could see it now. The blue was glowing like the iridescent moss you sometimes found in caves. And as I looked down, I thought I saw 3 people swimming down there. They were looking up at me, but I leaned away before they could entice me over. "Clint," Daniel said. "Clint, we need to go." "Go?" Clint asked, not seeming sure what he was talking about. "Yeah, we need to go. It's too late for Carter, but your mother's worried sick about you. Aunt Claire thinks you and your brother have been kidnapped. Maybe even that the same people got you who got Henry. Let's go back. Let's go back before something happens." "Something already happened," Clint said, his voice husky. "Carter's gone. Henry's gone. And I'm tired of living with these dreams every night. They aren't going to stop until we all go in. And I'm tired of fighting it." "What are you?" Daniel started, but Clint had stood up and sprinted for the lip of the drop before we could stop him. Daniel made a grab for him, but missed completely. We both stepped after him, trying to catch him, but he was over the edge before we could even process what was happening. He didn't splash when he went in, just like Catherine hadn't, and Daniel and I stood there breathing heavily as we watched the still surface of the blue. When he didn't surface, we walked back to the cabin with only the moon to guide us and called our parents. Emergency services came in to dive in the blue again, but Daniel and I just sat there in shock. We've got to get some distance from this," Daniel said. "Maybe if we go where she can't find us, the dreams will stop and we can avoid the same fate as the others did." I asked him if he believed that, and all he could say was it was worth a shot. They sold the cabin after that. My Aunt Claire and Uncle Dale had lost both their kids in one night, and they took it pretty hard. Daniel and I helped each other through the next few years, but when Daniel graduated and said he was taking a job overseas, I could tell that the dreams were starting to get to him. I'd kept my grades up, using the sleepless nights to study, and was eligible for early graduation. I'd been accepted into a college 3 states away, something that broke my mother's heart. Daniel wished me luck. For the next 3 years, we just kind of maintained. The dreams got better with distance, and soon I stopped having them altogether. Daniel told me the same and built a life for himself in South America. After 3 years, I almost forgot about the dreams and the blue, just chalking it up to something remembered wrong from childhood. And as I got closer and closer to graduation, I couldn't wait to start my new life. Then Aunt Liz died, and Uncle Mike had begged Daniel to come back. Aunt Liz had died of a stroke in her bed, having left the facility years ago. And Uncle Mike was a mess. He had never really gotten over the loss of Henry, and he begged Daniel to come back and help him. Daniel had agreed to come back and help with the funeral preparations, but then he said he had to go back. He invited Uncle Mike to come back with him, saying he could stay with him in South America, but he doubted that he would. "It's only for a couple of weeks, a month tops. I'll be fine," he assured me. Now, he was gone too. As I sit on the floor typing this out, I can hear something I haven't in 3 years. The blue is calling again. Catherine is calling again. I don't know how long I can hold out. Sooner or later, I'll go join the rest of them. Sooner or later, I'll return to the blue. The old guilt is still there. It's always been there. I was a fool to think I could run from it. I should have saved myself the trouble and jumped in the night Clint went in. Now, I'm the last. It's only a matter of time before Catherine gets me, too.
One more story for you, and I promise I've saved the best for last. It's a story about 2 movers, there to unload and clean a very different sort of home. But what they find will change and transport both of them indefinitely. Let's hear a story about the glowing tunnel.
My brother and I work for a cleaning company in our hometown. We're both still in high school. He's a junior and I'm a senior. So it was either this or fast food. The owner is a friend of Dad's. We'll call him Chuck to protect the innocent. Chuck's a nice enough guy. My brother and I have known him since we were young, but he leaves a lot to be desired as a businessman. Don't misunderstand. The guy makes money, but he seems to think that employee safety comes after profit. My brother and I worked like dogs for him all summer, cleaning out people's yards and moving boxes out of abandoned houses. Anything to make a buck, I guess. It was nearly July when Chuck got a call from another of his old friends, Philip O'Dare. If Chuck is a little underhanded in his business practices, then Philip is a goddamn pirate. He's the town's #1 real estate agent, and I mean everything when I say that he sells everything. He owns a pawn shop, Broke Brokers, with his younger brother. When he wasn't out selling houses, he was looking for homes to buy. The homes he picks up are rough, most of the time. If he were selling them a fixer-upper, that would be okay. The problem is that after he picks up these houses for next to nothing, he does shoddy Band-Aid repairs on them. Then he sells them for top prices, usually to pick them back up a few years later when the occupants move out in disgust. My current situation is thanks in part to Philip's underhanded renovations and Chuck's less than stellar business sense. The Foskey place? I asked. I didn't even know Mr. Foskey was dead. Chuck looked up from his notepad, his gray hair making him look like a cloud with glasses. He's not. Foskey's son sent him to Golden View and sold his house to O'Dare Real Estate. That made me a little sad. Mr. Foskey had been my English teacher when I was in middle school, and he had also taught Dad when he was in 8th grade. My brother had not been what you would call an advanced English compatible student, so he didn't get him. But Dad and I both agreed that Mr. Foskey was the best. He always had such cool lesson plans and exciting books in his class library. He challenged his advanced students to be more than a title and wanted us to be more than just A-plus students. I was sad to hear that he had been fired a couple of years ago. He had started to get a little senile in his old age. Everyone said so. And his taste in books had always been a little esoteric. After he'd been fired, he'd become a hermit. He only came out at night, and the word around town was that he'd been going through people's garbage. What he sought was anyone's guess, but people came to visit him and said his house was full of junk. Now he was gone, off to the mental hospital in the next town, and we were left to clean up his house. Phil says to save anything that looks valuable. Apparently the guy had a ton of old books that were probably worth money. Foskey's son sold Phil the house and everything in it, so don't bother saving anything sentimental. A couple of weeks in the puzzle factory and the old man probably won't even remember his own name. I left before I could say anything stupid. The thought of a brilliant man like Mr. Foskey losing his mind in a place like Golden View made me sick at the time. Now, I think it might be exactly what he deserves. We arrived at 6 a.m. Philip was waiting for us, a cell phone against his ear and a latte in his other hand. He was dressed in his usual blue suit, and I imagine we looked pretty shabby next to him, in our jeans and black t-shirts with the company name on them. My brother had rolled the sleeves up on his motorcycle boots peeking out from beneath the cuffs of his new jeans. He was going through some kind of James Dean phase, but it really just made him look like an extra in Grease. We waited for Philip to finish, and when he did, he looked at us like we were in the way. "Well, what are you waiting for?" "A breakdown on what exactly we're doing," I said a little hotly. "I thought you boys were smart. Clean the damn house and save what can be sold. Old bastard bought the house 5 years ago after his kids moved out. It's a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, and I have a client who wants to see it Wednesday, so if you could not take all week about it, that would be great. We'll take a look and let you know by the end of the day, okay?" He scoffed again, clearly saving all that charm for his clients. "Just have it done. I'll pay you double if you can finish it by Wednesday. You, not your boss." That was a tempting offer. Chuck was great, but he tended to be a little tight with the checks. We were being paid under the table, so we couldn't really argue. But some extra cash would be sweet. I shook Philip's hand, and he said to have it done by Wednesday. He nodded and left, the sound of his T-bird cutting up the road as he went. I immediately regretted my words when I saw inside the house. The house had a strange floor plan. There was a living room, a dining room with a bar that overlooked from the kitchen, Off the kitchen was a bathroom, and a door to get out back where you could sit in a small backyard. Off the living room was another door that I guessed was to the bedroom. The house had a strange sort of feel to it when you came inside, and I could believe that such a place would draw Mr. Foskey to it. It was eccentric in a practical way, a way that he would have understood. The living room dining room was full of trash and furniture, stuffed floor to ceiling, and I could see a little walkway from the living room to the kitchen. The kitchen was spared the worst of it, but it was still covered in garbage. The floor was a solid foot of garbage, the cabinets were covered in old food wrappers, and the refrigerator seemed clean, though it wouldn't open due to the junk on the floor. The cabinets were stuffed with garbage, and I sighed as I thought about the job at hand. This looked like a good week's worth of work between the living room and the kitchen alone. I'll take the kitchen, you take the living room. Whoever finishes first will help the other. Why do you get the kitchen? I rolled my eyes at him. I see a lot of furniture in there, football star. You got Dad's build, so you do the heavy lifting. Guess that means you got Mom's build, so I guess you can get your bitch ass in the kitchen, he said with a laugh. We put on our respirators, rubber boots, and thick gloves. We hadn't seen anything that would make us break out the hazmat suits yet, but I like to be safe. We were definitely working with some old refuse, possibly refuse that had been outside, which meant that rodents were a danger, as well as insects. We were cleaning out a shed like this not even a month ago, and ran upon a secret hornet's nest. That had made us wary about attacking big mounds of trash, so I was careful to look where I was putting my hands as I started in the kitchen. I got lucky. The trash was mostly dry and clean, and it was easily bagged up. I heard my brother straining and grunting in the living room, and I looked out to see him wrestling with a sizable piece of furniture. He was dragging it out onto the lawn. Philip had a mobile storage unit pointing out front, and then loading them into the unit. I watched him groan as he tried to lift an antique dining room table, which had been the linchpin on a large pile of garbage before going to help him. The pile fell over as we freed the table, and I helped him lug it out onto the yard. This is how we spent our first day, at least till mid-afternoon. By 4, I had all the garbage out of the kitchen. My brother had gotten most of the furniture out of the living room, and was wiping sweat off his brow as he stuffed papers into a bag. Doesn't this guy have AC? I haven't seen a thermostat. Maybe it's in the bedroom. My brother stood up and walked to the door, coming off the living room. As he opened it, I heard him whistle and came to see what he had found. Inside the bedroom was a tunnel of solid junk. It snaked to the left, getting dim inside, and the tunnel looked as though someone had cut it out of solid junk. You sure you want to go in there? I asked. He just rolled his eyes and took a pen light out of his pocket. This shouldn't take long, he said as he tromped into the room. I stood for a few seconds, making sure the whole pile wouldn't just fall over, and went back to work in the kitchen. I should have gone with him, maybe been a little more attentive, but I was in a hurry and really wanted to have a look at the bathroom before quitting time. I got all the garbage bags out of the cabinets, stuffed 6 bags with nothing but trash. I unearthed the sink and the microwave and had started cleaning the countertops when I noticed something wasn't right. The trash was still in the same place my brother had left it, and the door to the bedroom still hung open. Was he still in there? There was no way it had taken him an hour to navigate the bedroom and find the thermostat. I called his name into the bedroom. The name almost seemed to echo down the trash hall, but there was no answer. It was starting to get close to sunset, and I really wanted to be out of here before dark. Thinking maybe he had fallen or gotten hurt in there, I grabbed a headlamp and headed into the trash maze. I turned the corner and was bombarded by the claustrophobia of the trash tunnel. The tunnel was a solid mass of trash that seemed almost sculpted. It was like someone had built a wall out of mortar and trash and then cut a tunnel out of it. There was a soft light coming from the garbage wall, and when I turned off my headlamp, I found I could see. The dim light seemed to be coming from something inside the wall, but even with the headlamp on, I couldn't tell what it was. It made navigating the strange, winding maze a little easier, but the size started to unsettle me as I moved. The bedroom was supposedly 12 by 12, but this maze seemed to be winding on farther than the whole house. I'd been taking turns for several minutes when I came upon the first strange sight. Coming around a bend, I came face to face with a small library. A small grotto held 4 bookcases, stuffed with old-looking books. Many of them were covered in mold, and as I got close, I could see bugs moving across them. I backed away and kept walking, not sure how deep this rabbit hole went, but wanting to be out more and more with every step. I kept looking down periodically, seeing if I could see a print from my brother's big rubber boots in the dust. I was looking for any sign that he had passed this way, but I was coming up with nothing so far. Then I came upon the old man. I turned a corner and found myself in a 10-by-10 park with honest-to-God grass. There was a lamppost that spilled light over the old park bench, and an old man sat on it, feeding real pigeons. As I approached, he patted the bench as though he wanted me to sit. One look at the old man told me that I did not want to sit there. He was dressed in a long coat that looked patched and frayed, a fuzzy old cap obscuring his face. He patted the seat again as I approached, but I had already decided that I would not be stopping. The whole situation was a little creepy, and I intended to just walk on and continue on my way. When his hand shot out and grabbed me, I nearly jumped a foot. His hand was covered in thick green mold, and when he looked up, I could see the same mold growing on his face. He grinned his gap-toothed smile at me, and for a moment I thought it was Mr. Foskey. His grip was firm, but moist, and when I pulled away, his hand slipped off, and he sat there, grinning at me. Something clamped down on my ankle then, and I looked down to see that he was feeding rats. These were wharf rats, too, no cute pet shop mice, and as they tried to scuttle up my rubber boot, I kicked out at them and turned to run. The old man was standing then, a creaky moan coming from his dusty throat, but I was out of the park and into the tunnel again. I ran, flat out, and as I ran, I imagined I could see lights in the wall reaching out for me. Their brightness came reaching out towards me, and I ducked away from them as I came. The tunnel seemed to be nightmarishly claustrophobic as I ran, and I began taking turns at random. I had no idea where I was or where I was going. I only knew that I wanted to be out. I prayed that this tunnel would end, and I would just flop out onto the carpet in the dirty living room, that my brother would be waiting there for me. He would wonder where I had been and what had taken me so long, and we would leave and never come back to this place. Screw O'Dare, and screw his money too. As I stopped panting, clutching the stitch in my side, I just wanted to be out. That's when I heard the footsteps. They echoed strangely up the tunnel, and they filled me with a deep sense of dread. Was it the old man coming after me? Some new horror? I didn't know, but the steps were heavy and ominous, and I knew that I did not want them to find me. I hid around the corner in a little trash alcove and shuddered in my cowardice. The steps grew closer. I was shaking all over. The footsteps were slow and knowing. I just knew it was some kind of new monster that wanted me. It was some mold monster that was trying to invade me like it had invaded the old man. It was the old man who wanted to breathe spores into me and infect me. I didn't know what it was, and I didn't care. At that moment, I just wanted to leave, and I was willing to kill to get out of here. Clump, clump, clump. I saw a rock on the ground. Clump, clump, clump. It looked jagged, broken like a paving stone. Clump, clump, clump. I picked it up and held it against my chest. Clump, clump, clump. I closed my eyes and steeled myself for what I was about to do. Clump, 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 clump. I rounded the corner and swung the stone, and it connected with something that immediately staggered back, bellowing. I swung it again, but it hit me around the waist and drove me to the ground. I dropped the rock in the skirmish, and as it rolled away, I felt hands close around my throat. It was choking me, choking the life out of me, and as I groped around, I could see little black swirls at the corners of my vision. I swung my fist out at it, but without oxygen, it was a weak swing at best. I went back to groping, trying to find something, and finally, my hands settled on something hard and jagged. I grabbed the rock and swung it, filling my lungs with air as the hands loosened, and the shape fell away. I lifted the rock and swung it down at the shape, hitting it in the head. I straddled it, swinging it again and again and again, until it finally stopped moving. I was panting then, out of breath, covered in sweat, but I felt my breath escape in a sudden whoosh when I flipped on the headlamp. I was choking again. I could not find any air. I was straddling a human being, his face mostly caved in, but the rolled-up shirt sleeves were a dead giveaway. He was wearing our shirt, the shirt with the two happy moving men on the front, and as I threw the rock away, the tears began to flow. I jumped off him and ran, leaving him in the tunnel to God only knows what. I ran in a blind panic. I ran until I couldn't run anymore, and I just kept running. I ran until my legs burned, and my lungs heaved. I bumped into the walls and saw them crumble around me. As they fell, I felt the trap envelop me. I embraced the entombing refuse as my fate. I had killed my brother. I deserved to be encased in garbage for all eternity. I deserved it. I deserved it. I could see flashing lights and was aware of being carried. I opened my eyes to see two paramedics rolling me into an ambulance. Chuck was following behind them, clearly panicked. Philip was there too, but he looked more aggravated than worried. As we drove away in the ambulance, I looked around. They seemed to become aware that I wasn't unconscious. What happened? I asked, and the two of them filled me in. Philip had come out after dark to check on our progress. After finding the house mostly still cluttered, he had called Chuck and told him to get down there. The house was still a disaster, and his workers were nowhere to be found. When Chuck arrived, they found me passed out in the living room under a pile of garbage. They had called the paramedics, fearing I had broken my neck, and had then come to check me out. "Tera says you're lucky to be alive, honestly," said Chuck. Philip elbowed him, wanting him to shut up. "Why?" I asked. He said the whole place was crawling with black mold. It was around the crown of the ceiling, the baseboards. Hell, the whole place was ate up. It's a good thing your brother left early, eh? I told Chuck I didn't remember him leaving. I told him about the bedroom, the tunnel, the strange things I'd seen there. I don't think Chuck believed me, but they did go back to the house to look for him. They came to see me in the hospital later that night, told me they hadn't seen a hide nor hair of him. He wasn't at home. They'd called Dad, and his truck was still at Chuck's place. They didn't know where he was, but they were sure he would turn up. I didn't answer that. A week later, they let me go, and I went back to the house. It's still a mess. The guys Philip got to clean it aren't as diligent as my brother and I, but they're great at leaving doors unlocked. I stood before the bedroom door like I expected it to open on its own and suck me in. It didn't, and when I finally opened it, I found not a tunnel, but a cluttered bedroom on the other side. Just a bedroom. No tunnel, no monsters, just a regular old bedroom. It's been 2 weeks, and no one's seen my brother. He's lying dead in some weird trash tunnel with his head caved in. A part of me knows this, but a part of me also knows that there is no trash tunnel behind that door. I don't know what to do. Dad is getting worried. The police have no leads, and I can't find the tunnel. I killed him. It's my fault. But if I tell people the story, they're going to lock me up in Goldenview right along with Mr. Foskey. I went to visit him a few days ago. No one's monitoring who visits the residence at Goldenview. When I asked him about the trash tunnel and the glowing mold, he just stared at me blankly. I begged him to tell me, screamed at him to help me find my brother, but whatever light was in Mr. Foskey when I was in his English class is gone now. Now he just sits in the day room and watches soap operas with the rest of them. I don't know what to do. How do I get my brother back? What will happen to whatever poor sap buys the house next when they open that door? Will they find their familiar bedroom? Or will they be the next victim of the glowing tunnel?
And just like that, our stories are at an end for another day. Oh, but don't worry. There's a whole nother week of cozy horror ahead of you. But until then, it's time for yours truly to wish you all a good afternoon and a spooky evening.